God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. This prayer, so popular in the English-speaking world, it once hung over John Kennedy's desk and has been used by Alcoholics Anonymous since 1940, reflects a deep human need to bring order to our own thoughts and emotions. Every day, countless ideas rush into your mind, demanding your attention. They tell you what to say, what to do, where to go. That's why it's so important to be careful about which thoughts you allow to take root. Negative thoughts are better thrown out as soon as they appear, because they steal not only your time, which you could spend on something constructive, but also your health. We all run into unpleasant things every single day: failed projects, mistakes we can't stop thinking about, chaos at work, or simple everyday problems at home. And in the modern world, there are endless reasons to feel this way. The real problem is that most people have no idea how to deal with this inner storm effectively. What happens when you start replaying the same painful scenes over and over in your head? The British psychologist Lisa Firestone notes that according to one large study with 30,000 participants, the main cause of their psychological problems was not the negative events themselves, but the constant mental chewing of these events and relentless self-blame. Put simply, quite often, it's not what happens to you that breaks you. It's what you keep telling yourself about it. Some psychologists call this stream of self-directed negativity the inner critic. It's a never-ending inner dialogue filled with accusations, replaying the same humiliating, painful episodes again and again. The time you spend in this dark conversation with yourself is lost forever. Negative thoughts will never raise you to a new level. At best, they keep you walking in circles. At worst, they deepen the wound. This inner voice can be dangerous. It whispers that you shouldn't trust the people close to you. It insists you're a failure. Sometimes it even suggests things that are truly frightening. That's why you cannot allow these thoughts to grow roots in your mind. The moment you recognize the inner critic, you gain a small but powerful advantage. At that point, it's worth mentally stepping back and saying to yourself, "This isn't me, this is him." You are not your self-destructive thoughts. And the sooner you separate yourself from that voice, the sooner you can begin to quiet it and make room for a different kind of inner conversation. Experts also advise, in such moments, to deliberately switch your attention to more constructive thoughts. It's not always easy, but it is possible. For example, your inner critic says, "I'm a complete zero. Nothing will ever work out for me." You can answer, "All right, this time I made a mistake. So what? It happens. Next time I'll do better, because now I have experience." In this way you shut down the critic, but not yourself. You refuse to stay trapped in your negative past and instead take a step forward and think about the future. Research shows that gratitude can stand in the way of this unnecessary, harmful stream of thoughts. When you feel like life has turned into one long streak of bad luck, try to find at least one good thing you can be grateful for. To your loved ones, your friends, or even to the universe itself. That alone means that not everything in your life is as bad as it seems. There are still bright moments worth remembering. Now is no time to think of what you do not have. Think of what you can do with what there is. Ernest Hemingway, The Old Man and the Sea. Sometimes negative thoughts become obsessive, like uninvited guests. But the true master of the house always finds the right words to show them to the door in time. Everyone is occasionally visited by a spoiled mood, vague longing, sadness, gloom, grief, fear. Yet a living soul also has living words that can scatter the darkness. Even a person's worst enemies would never wish upon him the misfortunes his own thoughts can bring, says an Eastern proverb. One of the main virtues of a free personality is to be the master in the house of your own soul. To own your thoughts, your feelings, your words, to live with a mind of your own. A human being is not only the subject of knowledge, but also its object. As Osip Mandelstam put it, "I am both the gardener and the flower." Inner freedom is found by those who learn to govern the flow of thoughts that pass through their mind. In life, there are all kinds of moments, both positive and negative. Very often, fearing failure, we start rehearsing misfortune in advance. Afraid of an exam, we paint a vivid picture of our own collapse. On an informational level, we become a generator of negative waves that spread through the subtle layers of our emotional and mental life. These waves have a powerful effect on us and on our actions. The jealous are always looking through a spyglass that turns small things into great ones, dwarfs into giants, guesses into truth. Cervantes. In physics, there is the concept of self-oscillation and self-sustained waves, a wave process in a non-equilibrium medium that maintains itself over time. Such waves underlie many control and information transfer processes in biological systems. In a similar way, negative waves generated by our own thoughts act back on us. They drag down our mood and physical well-being. In this state, we inevitably recall past painful experiences and fears, generating new waves and launching a process that becomes very difficult to stop. That's why it's crucial to place a firm taboo on the kinds of thoughts that bring us no benefit, yet quietly poison our lives. The very term taboo, a strict, almost sacred prohibition against a certain action, was originally borrowed by anthropologists from the ritual and religious practices of Polynesia. In modern science, it's used to describe a system of specific prohibitions whose features, under different names, are found among all peoples who have reached a certain stage of cultural development. The cultural roots of the taboo were studied by the famous founder of psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud. For him, the history of taboo in humanity is tied first and foremost to the prohibition of incest, close sexual relations between blood relatives. From a non-Freudian, more functional point of view, this prohibition helped prevent both the physical degeneration of the tribe and internal conflicts over women. Partners had to be obtained, usually by kidnapping or winning them from other tribes. But for Freud, another aspect was more important. A taboo is not just a prohibition, it's a prohibition that is never really explained. It's simply, you must not, and that's that. In the primitive world, speech itself was still poorly developed, and science did not exist at all. Yet there was already a vast store of lived experience, which was condensed into myths. Freud noted that it is precisely in cosmogonic myths, stories about the creation of the world and the origin of humanity, that taboos are typically introduced. For modern humans, it is no less important to establish an equally strict taboo on useless thoughts. Fortunately, Homo sapiens is a highly developed biological organism with powerful mechanisms of self-regulation. We are able to shape our reality by modeling our inner picture of the world through self-suggestion. We are lucky. We can see in two different ways. We can look at an object with our eyes. The image passes through the lens of the eye, is projected on the retina, and then travels along the optic nerve into the visual cortex of the brain. But we can also look at nothing at all, even close our eyes, and simply switch on our imagination. Then an inner image appears in that very same visual area of the brain. That's how we see dreams. Neurophysiologists have progressed so far that they've learned how to record signals from the visual cortex and reconstruct the images we invent onto a computer screen. For an imaginative person, these inner pictures are no less real than those seen with open eyes. And just as easily, they can regularly plunge us into a state we call trance. Trance is possible because of our tendency toward selective attention, those moments when what your eyes see, what your ears hear, and what your hands feel is pushed into the background by your own inner storyline, which, at that moment, is far more compelling. You're reading a book, and the main character is going through a love drama. At some point, you're no longer seeing printed words on a page. You're watching your own inner film about unhappy love. Your subjective perception of reality becomes stronger than the objective one. The inner picture drowns out the signals from the outside world, and you are, for all practical purposes, hypnotized. In fact, people exist in a state of trance almost constantly, jumping from one trance to another. Some do it professionally. A conductor standing in front of 110 musicians at rehearsal can still hear each one separately. Selective attention, the selective analysis of incoming signals, is an astonishing ability of the brain, and it would be a shame not to use it to improve the quality of your life. Jealousy is a monster that conceives and gives birth to itself. William Shakespeare. Although humans are capable of multitasking and can visually and orally keep track of two processes at once, The main focus of attention will always stay where consciousness is actively working right now. We can think about one thing and do another. But when you are fully aware of what you're doing, the result is better, if only because it gives you the chance to switch on creativity. A person is always living inside a very specific bundle of sensations and experiences that only partially corresponds to the real world. We don't quite feel what is actually there, don't quite see it, don't quite hear it as it really is. That is why each person's experience is utterly unique. Even twins will watch the same show differently. One will be absorbed by one detail, the other by something else. Over time, that difference in perception is exactly what helps them grow into two distinct personalities. Perception is reality, as Americans like to say. In practice, only the events we have granted the honor of our attention feel truly real to us. The great psychologist and physiologist Dmitri Uznadze developed the theory of attitudes. By this he meant a built-in readiness in a person to perceive, evaluate, and act toward the world in a certain way. In simple terms, each of us carries an inner preset for how we see reality, and that preset quietly directs our behavior. If we make it even simpler, a person with a positive preset always sees the glass as half full. And one of the key players in forming this inner readiness is serotonin, an incredible neurotransmitter that influences memory, emotions, sleep, the way bears sink into hibernation, our vivid dreams, our ability to meditate, our inclination toward practices like yoga, our sense of self, our inner calm, and our feeling of harmony. And importantly, serotonin also affects tolerance, one of the most crucial qualities in today's world. A person who constantly sees the glass as half empty usually has very low levels of serotonin. The same is true, by the way, of a criminal in the moment of a hot-blooded, impulsive crime. This substance is produced by the body from the essential amino acid tryptophan, which is found mainly in protein-rich foods, caviar, rabbit meat, beef. So, in a very real sense, our ability to see the world in a positive light is also a matter of chemistry. Only his thoughts make a man unhappy or happy, not his external circumstances. By mastering his thoughts, he masters his happiness. Friedrich Nietzsche. We live in a world that we ourselves construct. At any moment, we can give ourselves an inner command to cut off everything that threatens to destroy the fragile harmony of our existence. In philosophy, in the theory of knowledge, there is a concept called Occam's razor, a methodological principle named after the English Franciscan monk and nominalist philosopher William of Ockham. In its brief form, it says, entities must not be multiplied beyond necessity. Ockham himself wrote, "What can be done with fewer assumptions should not be done with more, and multiplicity must not be posited without necessity." Sometimes this is also called the principle of parsimony or the law of economy. Put simply, if we have a simpler, more economical explanation for some puzzle, scientific or otherwise, that's the one we should choose, cutting away the rest with Occam's razor. Something like Occam's razor is worth applying to certain thoughts in our own heads. There are things it's better simply not to think about. For example, a healthy person does not constantly dwell on death, because if you live with the thought of death in your mind all the time, it becomes unclear whether you are truly living at all. Another topic that deserves a strict inner taboo is exaggerated, hypertrophied jealousy. Lope de Vega once wrote, "Believe me, love leaves by the same road by which jealousy enters." It's a painfully accurate line. Our brain's greatest gift is the ability to choose a certain angle from which we look at life. That angle, that inner setting, is one of the biggest chances we have to be happy. A healthy relationship always includes the right to personal space. We zip up our bags, tuck money into an inside pocket, buy solid wardrobes and thick curtains so that our belongings don't reveal too much. Not because there is something terrible to hide, but because too much unnecessary information can quietly become dangerous. As Vissarion Belinsky said, "A person fears only what they do not know. All fear is overcome by knowledge." Remember the old story about two monks walking to Santiago de Compostela? At a river, a young woman is standing, afraid to cross. The first monk picks her up, carries her across, and sets her down. They walk on. The second monk starts nagging. "I saw you touch her chest. She was breathing into your ear. You must have desired her. Shame on you. We're on our way to a holy place." The first monk calmly replies, "I left that woman back at the river. You're still carrying her." Negative fantasies can poison even the happiest life. Sooner or later, you have to set a rule inside yourself. Don't dwell on death. Don't dwell on the worst-case scenario. Don't constantly compare yourself to others. Think about your own path. Color your world with brighter tones, without creating problems for others or peeking behind their curtains. Yes, this inner rule is also a kind of trance. But since we are doomed to move from one trance state to another, we might as well choose the most comfortable ones. Most of the time, a person can choose how to live, in joy or in sorrow. Think of Bach's famous endings. He often finished his religious pieces in a minor key with a final major chord, so that people would leave church with faith and without anxiety. Horror movies do the opposite. They love an ellipsis at the end, a hint that the monster is not completely destroyed, and that another chapter of nightmares is coming. Interestingly, the monster itself is not the worst part. When you see it, your brain at least starts working on survival. Climb a tree, jump into the water, run. What truly torments us is the anticipation of horror, the thoughts about it, even if we only watch from the outside. If the camera moves as though it's inside the victim, the fear grows. But the most terrifying is when the camera is inside the monster's head. The viewer feels anxiety, senses that the danger comes from themselves, yet doesn't fully understand who they are. The conclusion is simple. A person who knows who they are, who invests a lot of effort into building a rich inner world, lives without that paralyzing fear. No director will ever create a creature with enough heads, arms, legs, tongues, and teeth to truly frighten someone who is grounded in themselves. As Victor Hugo wrote, "Fear has a way of exaggerating the true significance of a fact." If this journey into your own inner theater of thoughts resonated with you, consider subscribing and sharing this video with someone who also needs a quieter mind. Your support helps us keep creating deep, carefully crafted stories like this one. In the end, no one can fully protect you from life's chaos, not science, not philosophy, not even the wisest quotes. But you can protect yourself from the worst director of horror in your life, your own ungoverned imagination. You can place a taboo on useless thoughts, refuse to rehearse misfortune in advance, and stop feeding the monster of jealousy and suspicion that turns tiny details into giants. You don't have to watch the world forever through the eyes of your fear. You can take the camera back into your own hands and choose a different angle. Because the moment you decide what deserves your attention, you are no longer the victim of the story. You are the one who writes it.